For the past 3.5 decades, the Honda Civic Si has been the vehicle of choice for enthusiasts looking for something sporty, comfortable, reliable, but above all, affordable. Now, unfortunately for Honda, the previous 10th generation Si didn't really feel too much like a sport-injected Civic, and it kind of felt more like a guzzied up version of a Civic Sport. Now, for 2022, there's an all-new 11th generation Civic Si. It's built off of the next generation Civic platform, and I actually had a chance to drive this vehicle out in California in November of last year, and I was simply blown away with the entire package that Honda is offering. Now, as you can see, this week, Honda has loaned me this beautiful blazing orange Civic Si with the all-season tires, and we're gonna actually live with the car for a week. So I'm gonna put it through my usual battery of tests. We're gonna drive the vehicle like a prospective owner would, and at the end of this video, I'm gonna find out, has Honda still managed to make a Civic Si that's going to appeal for enthusiasts who are on a budget? Stay tuned to find out. Now, before we talk about the exterior styling changes for this 11th generation Civic Si, I'm going to remind you guys what's powering the vehicle under the hood. Remember, Si stands for Sport Injected, so you're expecting a little bit more muscle under here versus a standard Civic. And what you find under here is Honda's corporate 1.5 liter direct injection double overhead cam VTEC 4-cylinder engine. It's been updated slightly this year with the VTEC on the intake side for this vehicle, and of course it has direct injection. It makes 200 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. That is about 5 less horsepower versus the previous generation Si, which doesn't look good on paper, but if you compare it to like a Civic Sport, this offers about 20 more horsepower and around 20 more-ish pound-feet of torque. So a pretty good number increase versus a standard Civic. And like all Si's before it, this only comes with a manual transmission, a very good one, a 6-speed manual transmission with updated ratios, an updated flywheel for the clutch, and it also has reduced rev hang this year. It's a very good manual, and it also has active rev matching that they've basically taken from the Civic Type R. Now, Honda doesn't quote a 0 to 60 performance time for this vehicle, but we have our equipment with us. We'll strap it onto this vehicle and we'll see what we can get. In terms of fuel economy, this engine is also rated to get 27 in the city and 37 on the highway. Premium gas is recommended for performance. You can put regular in this vehicle. It has around a 12-gallon gas tank, and as this car sits, it is still relatively lightweight by modern car standards. This one here weighs just over 2,900 pounds. Now, closing the hood, let's go ahead and take a look at the styling of this mature 11th generation Civic. Now, in this beautiful color blazing orange, which I think Honda basically ordered all of the Civic Si's in the fleet of America to be this color, it certainly stands out, and it helps to kind of mask the mature Accord-like styling of this car. You can see in terms of the front fascia, it has a unique front fascia that it shares kind of with the Civic hatchback, especially when you look at the grille with the honeycomb inserts. The Si, of course, gets the Si badge to the right side of the grille, and you can see the headlights. All Si's now come standard with full LED headlights with LED low and high beams, LED turn signals, LED daytime running lights. Down here, you can see no fog lights. I believe the Canadian version of this car has fog lights, so Honda has kind of decontented this car a little bit. You can see the front fascia also has more of that black. It's a flat black look as opposed to a gloss black. I think a gloss black would have looked better in my opinion, but overall, looking at the profile of this vehicle, you can see it's almost a little bit too conservative, but Honda really wanted to address the overly extroverted styling of the previous generation with something that I think is probably going to age a little bit better. Now, in terms of the overall length, this vehicle is 184 inches long. It's just under 71 inches wide, and its wheelbase is the longest in the segment at 107.7 inches long. In fact, if you guys are going to look at this car's platform mate vehicle, which is the Acura Integra, it doesn't share a single body panel with the Integra. Aside from the wheelbase, the Acura is longer. It's actually wider. And the Honda has a more conservative, kind of more sedan-like profile versus the Acura. But again, I just drove the Integra yesterday, but we'll talk about that, how the two vehicles differ when I get out in the road in terms of the driving scene. Now, looking at the wheels, you can see the Si comes with their own specific matte black finished 18-inch wheels, which look great. They're wrapped in a 235/40 R18 rubber. This one here has the Goodyear Eagle Sport all-season tires. You can, for $200 extra, get a summer performance tire, which I would recommend because this engine definitely has a lot of torque that'll overwhelm these front wheels. You can see the brakes are 12.3 inches. I really wish that Honda would have given us a 4-piston upgraded caliper with like a red paint. I think that would have looked really good on this car, but that's something I guess the aftermarket can do. And remember, the Civic Type R will likely have those upgraded brakes. You can see the rest of the profile here. The SI has black painted mirrors, you have black trim, and then it comes standard with a sunroof. No panel roof is available. I would have liked to see like a black roof option on this car. I think it would have looked really good, but I do like the overall silhouette, especially in this blazing orange. I think it's just a really attractive car. Obviously, we have an independent rear suspension, but what Honda did this year is they did remove the adaptive dampers that you could get on the previous generation, so that's something to keep in mind. Looking at the back here, you can see the taillights also have a unique look to them, where they are not fully LED, but they're kind of an incandescent for the turn signal and LED brake light. And then you can see here the exhaust has been completely redesigned this year. Now, Honda says it's a true dual exhaust system and it's much freer revving, and I definitely much prefer the sound of this vehicle versus the previous generation. Very excited to see what Honda does for the upcoming Type R in terms of the noise. Now, the rest of the profile, you can see the big wing spoiler has been removed. Instead, we have a very subtle rear deck lid spoiler, which is black painted. There's also a really small SI badge to the side over there, and then you can see no rear parking sensors, but with the dual exhaust, it's a very tasteful look. It kind of looks like a Volkswagen Jetta. Now, opening up the trunk capacity, you can see the trunk is pretty big for sedan standards. It's measuring just over 14 cubic feet of space. The seats do fold down in a 60/40 manner. There are hinges that crush your cargo. And then if you look underneath the floor here, you can see no spare tire, just an air compressor kit. And there's a little bit of storage there, which is nice. But overall, a really practical car. But if you want a hatchback, you're gonna have to go to the Civic hatch, which isn't available as an SI, or buy the new Acura Integra. So now let's move on to the interior of the redesigned Civic Si. The first thing I want to show you guys here is the current generation Honda key fob. It does come standard with their intelligent access key, the smart key system, but no remote start on the fob. Obviously, this only comes with a 6-speed manual. You can also access the car through the Honda Link app, which obviously I don't have access to because this is a press vehicle. Now, looking at the interior, you can see just like the previous generation Si, Honda keeps it pretty simple. You have a unique set of sport bucket seats, which are cloth. They have this really cool red insert with the contrast red stitching with the two-tone look. And you also have red stitching in the shifter, in the steering wheel, more red accents in the dash and on the door panels. So again, really cool looking interior. Not sure how it looks with the orange. It looks a little bit strange, but in another color combination like white, for example, or black, this would probably look really nice. You can see the door panel has the same door panel as other Civics with this same cloth insert here, piano black trim over here, silver accented door handle. There's this interesting faux carbon fiber textured plastic look on the window controls. These are the newest Honda window switches. One-touch automatic up for the front. Rears are not one-touch. Sadly, unlike the Civic Touring, this is a hard-touch injection molded plastic, which this should have been soft. I think that's just too much cost cutting for Honda there. Thankfully, this is nice and padded, which is great because that's where you're going to be resting your elbows. All hard touch plastic over here. And you can see the seats are just a 6-way manual adjustment. No power seats are available on the Si. You have to, again, go for the touring trim and then lose all the performance goodies of the Si. Now, getting inside the vehicle, you can see the step-in height feels pretty much the same as the other Civics. When I get in and shut the door, the door has a relatively solid sounding thunk, so that gives you the impression of quality. Now, looking at the instrument panel of this car, it almost looks like it's a fully digital display. However, when I start the vehicle up, you can see the start-stop button is right here. It's a manual, so you gotta make sure it's in neutral. You can see it's actually a half digital, half analog display. On the right side here, this is an analog display. On the left side, it is a digital display for the TAC. So it doesn't have the full digital display that you get in the Civic Touring models or the new Acura Integra. And it also isn't available with the heads-up display that you can get with the Integra. That's included when you guys go for the manual transmission model. Now, looking at the steering wheel, it's a nice steering wheel. Kind of wish that Honda went with a flat bottom design, but I like the contrast leather or the red stitching over here. The leather feels high quality. The steering wheel itself is a manual tilt and telescoping. Not very much adjustability and range for the telescope feature, but I can kind of get in this car and get pretty comfortable, so make sure you try that out. You can see lots of controls for your audio, for the Honda sensing. This vehicle does have active lane keep assist, automatic emergency braking, adaptive cruise control. It just lacks the low speed follow because of the manual. The horn on this vehicle sounds really puny. If you guys hate that horn, you can buy the new Integra, which actually has a much meatier sounding horn. Be sure to watch my video of that vehicle if you haven't seen so already. The dashboard, you can see, does have a soft touch injection molded plastic. It's a soft touch on the upper portion. I love the way this vent looks with the honeycomb mesh finish, where it looks like it's one big continuous piece, but you can see you have a really high quality click when you are adjusting the vents. I really like how this works. This is, again, the same design in the Integra. This is actually not a vent over here, but again, this looks really high quality. Same kind of switch over here on the passenger side and on the driver's side. So that's all very, very nice. The one thing about the SI is it only comes with a single zone automatic climate control. The Integra has a dual zone system, and you can see here empty buttons because no heated seats are available, along with no wireless phone charging pad. You can get that on other Civic trims and the new Integra, which is included with the tech package, but you cannot get a wireless charger in the SI, which is a little bit frustrating. Looking at the rest of the center stack here, you can see I was just in the new Integra yesterday, and this is the same center stack as the Acura, although the Acura has a slightly different shifter, and it also has piano black as opposed to this texturized fake carbon fiber look. I actually prefer this because this is going to show fingerprint scratches, or this isn't going to show fingerprints and scratches like the piano black finish. But the shifter, you can see it's got a new shift ball, redesigned transmission gear ratios a little bit. It's really short throw. The throws, I think Honda said, were 10% shorter. Kick it all the way over to the right and down to go to reverse. You can see there's your backup camera. It works well. It has decent resolution, but no 360 camera. You do have a rear cross traffic alert, but no parking sensors. Now, we can see here, that's the wireless CarPlay. This is the 9-inch touchscreen that you get on the Touring model. So at least Honda gave us the bigger screen, which is nice. The resolution and graphics also look pretty good. This doesn't include wireless over-the-air updates, but at least it has the wireless CarPlay. I like how there's a big volume knob. Could have done with a tuning knob as well, but you just have a tuning button and a standard home button there. No embedded GPS, which is something you also can't get in the new Integra, which is interesting, but most people are going to be using their phone anyways. The layout of this looks slightly different versus what you get in the Acura, especially when you're changing the drive modes. You can see the graphics don't look quite as good as the Integra, and there's only 3 drive modes here. There's a sport, normal, and individual. Individual basically allows you to just customize the engine and the steering. Remember, this car doesn't have adaptive dampers, so you can't actually adjust the suspension like you can in the new Integra. There is some piano black over here on the dashboard. I love the red accent around the entire dash vent, which is nice. And then over here you can see padded center console armrests. No lid here, but there's a pretty good amount of cup holder storage. Would be nice to see a manual parking brake, but this does take up less space. You can see, open this up, it's a pretty deep storage area. No USB charging ports in there, but you do have 2 over here, just 2 USB-A ports. The Integra has a USB-C port as opposed to an A port, so that's something to keep in mind. Honda and Acura tells me the chip shortage has really affected their production of the putting USB-Cs in their vehicles. You can see the seats look really great. I would love to see these with heated seats, but they do hold you in place nicely. Just a 4-way manual on the passenger side. It's pretty comfortable and supportive. Over at the glove box, you can see it's a bin style. It's damped but not lined with felt. Offers a good amount of storage. And then above me, there is some LED map lighting. No LED lighting in the cabin whatsoever. So that's something that the Acura gives you. And then you can see here, standard size sunroof, no pano roof. The roof panel has kind of like a cheaper fabric material. But overall, aside from the 9-inch screen and the Bose stereo, those are probably the highlights for this cabin in terms of tech. It's a relatively Spartan feeling cabin, but it has all the essentials. It feels comfortable, it feels spacious, it has good visibility, but I really wish that Honda would have given us a wireless phone charging pad, heated seats, and then perhaps dual zone climate control. That's something that you can get, I believe, on the Canadian version of this car. Looking at the back seat, you can see because of that stretch in the wheelbase versus the previous generation, we do have best-in-class legroom back here. Honda says there's around 37.5 inches of legroom, which is the same as the new Acura Integra, a couple inches more than the competition. Getting back here and shutting the door, you can see the back seat. What I don't like is it looks basically like it was taken from a Civic LX, aside from just the red trim. It doesn't have the red bolster or the red inner bolster as the front seats, but you can see the seats themselves, no adjustable headrests, no heated back seats back here. At least there is an armrest that folds down that gives you 2 cup holders, and in terms of the space, I can get comfortable pretty well back here. Materials, sadly, are hard touch plastic, and then no gloss black over here for this piece of trim, but it is slightly padded over here. And then you can see no rear seat air vents, no USB ports, no heated rear seats. The Integra doesn't give you the vents or the heated rear seats, but you do have USB ports, and then you can see here just 1 map storage pocket. So here we are back driving the 2022 completely redesigned Civic Si, and I actually had a really interesting opportunity because yesterday I drove the new Acura Integra with the 6-speed manual, which is essentially the same car. So in this video, I'm going to be able to compare the two somewhat, just to see how many changes that Acura and Honda has made to differentiate the two models. But this is the SI. This has been the enthusiast-friendly option for those of you on a budget for the last 3.5 decades. And when I last drove this car, I was in California. So now it's about 60 degrees out. We are in the middle of spring here, back in Pennsylvania, which is nice. I don't have the summer tires on my tester, but I do want to test out what I can get 0 to 60. Now, SI requires a little bit of a light touch when you want to get maximum acceleration, so we're going to feather the clutch at 3,000 RPM. That was bad. But you know what? I just got 7.15 seconds, which in my last video, the best time that Rob was able to get was 7.07 seconds. So obviously the SI is not made for straight line acceleration, but this is a pretty close time to what I got in the Integra, which was also around 7.1 seconds. The two cars practically weigh the same. We have the same 1.5 liter turbo with around 200 horsepower. It requires a light touch when you're launching this thing, because even though it has a limited slip differential, my tester is missing the summer tires, which would really help with putting the power down. This engine has a lot of torque, and it definitely shows with how much power it produces, and it makes it a little bit tricky to launch. Remember, this is still a front-wheel drive car, and front-wheel drive cars can be a little bit of a handful when you're trying to launch them for best 0 to 60 times. So this time I'm going to leave the traction control on and see if we can try to get a little bit better of a time here. That's better. Chirps into second. You still have to shift into third. 7.55 seconds there. That's with it going slightly uphill. So 7.1 is probably the best that you're going to do with the current generation Civic Si and perhaps even the Acura Integra. I'll have to retest that car when I get it back home for a week. But as you guys can see, the 0 to 60 time of this new generation has dropped a couple of tenths compared to the previous generation. I'm not entirely sure why. It could just be a gearing change for the manual transmission. It could be the way that the engine is tuned for more low-end power. But just know that its competitors are faster than the SI, so it doesn't look good on paper for this new generation, this new 11th generation model. However, the SI has never been about a numbers car. This has always been kind of a momentum car. It's been a point and shoot kind of car. It's been a car that you drive like you stole it. And this is where Honda really pushed the new SI to give us the best handling version to date, basically. The car has componentry from the previous generation Honda Civic Type R. They are about to completely reveal the next gen Type R. In about 2 months, I'll be there to see that vehicle as well. And then we'll be having it to drive probably by the end of this year. But this car finally feels like a baby Type R. That's what the previous generation really lacked. It felt like a guzzied up version of a Civic Sport with basically a limited slip differential added. This, however, has the sharper steering, the sharper suspension, the better shifter, really good steering feel in this car. And with that limited slip diff, you can basically chuck it around a corner here and floor it. There's a little bit of torque steer when I do that, but it has a much better sound as well, especially with that lightweight flywheel. The shifter feels good. The way the engine revs and responds also feels good. And also with the Revomatic, the active rev function, which works really well. It just downshifted to second there, and it's just perfect. It has a little bit of sound sound enhancement from the speakers, but I think it sounds pretty good. You don't really hear much from the exhaust in the cabin, although outside the exhaust does sound a little bit better, obviously, versus the previous generation. But this is very much a fun car. It makes me question, do you need a Type R? You could just buy this. Listen to that thing chirp all the way through first gear. And you know what? That gearing that doesn't allow you to get to 60 miles an hour in second really feels nice when you're driving this car hard on a curvy back road. It just always wants you to shift the car. The engine itself is much more freer revving this year. It does redline at around 6,500 RPM, and when it does, it really cuts the power hard. It doesn't reward you to go past the red line, which is a contrast of the previous naturally aspirated high revving SIs. This engine, basically, I just wish it revved a little bit more. But really, I'm just shocked. This is such a better handling car than the previous generation, even though on paper the numbers of this car sucks. I mean, 5 less horsepower, slower 0 to 60 times. But everything else that doesn't matter when you start driving this car, because it just drives so incredibly well. Now, the one thing that Honda did take away in this new SI versus the previous generation are the adaptive dampers. So when I switch the drive mode here between either normal, sport, or individual, it's basically just changing the engine response and the steering heft. It used to also adjust the dampers as well, but that is reserved for the Acura Integra, which I had a chance to drive. The Integra definitely rides better than this car. This car has a much firmer ride quality. It just feels a little bit more visceral. There's more engine noise coming in this car. There's more road noise coming in. It just feels like a firmer car. Now, this isn't too firm for me to daily drive. It's just borderline firm, but it's not quite as firm as like the Hyundai Elantra N, which I haven't had a chance to actually drive as of this filming. On a longer term, I'll be testing that car for a week next month or so. But compared to like a Kona N, for example, or a Volkswagen GLI, the SI's ride is softer than the Kona N, but I'd say it's smidge firmer than the Volkswagen GLI. The Volkswagen's definitely the most refined car, but the Honda really shocks you with the way the handling is, the way the steering is, the way the responsiveness is. I'm just shocked. I'm impressed with this car's driving dynamics, and it makes me question whether you need to buy a Civic Type R, because this feels like basically a Type R Lite. Now, in terms of fuel economy, Honda switched to this 1.5 a few years ago because it gets better gas mileage than the old 2.4. This is rated at 2737. In my weeks worth of testing, I've been averaging 26 mpg in mostly city driving. On the highway, it gets 35 miles to the gallon. That's with a steady 75-mile-per-hour cruise. So it's pretty good gas mileage. It does recommend premium for performance. You can get away with putting regular in this car, but it has a super small 12-gallon gas tank. You might as well just put premium in it, even with today's super expensive gas prices. The driver assistance tech in this car, it now has active lane keep assist. It's got automatic emergency braking. It does have adaptive cruise control. It just loses the low-speed follow function. But man, feel the way that engine responds. Love it. Love this car. Love the shifter. Love the clutch. The clutch is super light, although not as light as the new Integra. Surprisingly, the new Integra has an even lighter clutch than this car. The seats also really hold me in place nicely, although I do wish that they were heated. You lose the heated seats this year for this new generation, but at least they have aggressive bolstering. I would have liked to see like red seat belts in this car. Probably would have made it a little bit more interesting, because then it also adds 5 horsepower. But overall, very nice car to drive, very nice car to live with, and for the price, it's hard to beat this car. Remember, it's a better car in real life versus on paper and in terms of numbers. So if you guys are in the market for something like this, make sure this car makes it to the very top of your list. So after spending a full week driving and living with the 2022 Honda Civic Si, it's interesting because this car on paper, like I said, doesn't look good. It has less power, it's slower 0 to 60 wise, and Honda has decontented the Si for the US market, but they've also given us a couple of features that I think some buyers are going to appreciate more. Now, after spending a week driving this car, it's a phenomenal driving vehicle that feels a lot like a downscaled version of the Civic Type R. Now, what would have made it perfect if Honda gave us a detuned version of the Type R motor, but this little 1.5 has been shown to give great boost or great tuning potential, and at the wheels, a lot of people were saying this vehicle is probably making around 200, which means at the crank, it's probably making around 220. So it's a detuned engine and it feels a lot stronger than its numbers would suggest. The ride quality is on the firmer side, but what you do get is a fixed suspension that gives you incredible handling. Really balanced chassis, really little body lean in the corners, steering that feels a lot like the last generation Type R that I drove, and of course, wrapped in the Civic body, it is a practical car. You have plenty of space on the inside, in the rear seat, in the trunk. The Bose stereo sounds much better. I like how Honda also gave us the 9-inch touchscreen with wireless CarPlay, although I really am sad to see the adaptive dampers and the heated seats gone, but that's something that, again, that some enthusiasts may not even need because Honda did such a great job with the ride and handling. But overall, if you're looking to buy a vehicle like this car starts at $27,500 plus destination. Basically, your only option is the summer tires for $200. My tester here is around $28,355 without the summer tires, including destination. That's a really good deal, especially considering how expensive the competition is. Now, you could look at something like the Hyundai Elantra N, which obviously has a lot more power than this car, but it's also around $4,000 more expensive. If you also look at a Volkswagen GTI, that's going to be several $1,000s more expensive. I think a fully loaded version of that is like 40 grand. A GLI is going to be right around the main competition for this car, but again, the VW is still around $3,000 to $4,000 more expensive than an SI. However, all the competitors I mentioned have more horsepower and slightly more features, but I'd also argue that the Civic basically keeps up with the last Elantra N that I briefly drove, and Honda also gives you a great shifter. I think it still has the best shifter in the industry. but again, it leaves lots of potential in the tuning aftermarket scene to make this car even more crazy and even more fun to drive. Well, all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2022 Honda Civic Si. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.